Our first reading is from the Song of Solomon. I slept, but my heart was awake. Listen, my beloved is knocking. Open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is wet with dew, my locks with the drops of the night. I had put off my garment. How should I put it on again? I had bathed my feet. How could I soil them? My beloved thrust his hand into the opening, and my inmost being yearned for him. I arose to open to my beloved, and my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh upon the handles of the bowl. I opened to my beloved, but my beloved had turned and was gone. My soul failed me when he spoke. I sought him, but did not find him. I called him, but he gave no answer. Making their rounds in the city, the sentinels found me. They beat me, they wounded me. They took away my mantle, those sentinels of the walls. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, tell him this, I am faint with love.
A reading from Galatians. Now before faith came, we were imprisoned and guarded under the law until faith would be revealed. Therefore the law was our disciplinarian until Christ came, so that we might be justified by faith. But now that faith has come, we are no longer subject to a disciplinarian. For in Christ Jesus you are all children of God through faith. As many of you as were baptized into Christ have clothed yourselves with Christ. There is no longer Jew or Greek. There is no longer free nor slave. There is no longer male and female. For all of you are one in Christ Jesus. And if you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to the promise.
Please stand as you're able for our hymn of dedication, P98, We Are the Church of God.
As you open channels few days ago, I noticed on the MCC homepage there was a tab that said MCC branding store. Store? I wondered because as a child of consumerism, I like stuff. I especially like stuff that advertises the things that I love most. So I clicked on the link and I found MCC everything. MCC shirts, MCC hats, MCC frisbees, and I wanted all of the stuff. So I pointed at my computer and I shouted, "Jillian, the MCC things, there are a bunch, I can have them." And so my partner, Jillian, who is not nearly as excited to brand herself, well, unless it's the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the notorious RBG. Do you want to just put your arms down for a second? Here it is. So, aside from notorious RBG, she's not nearly as excited to brand herself with things. So she said, "Okay, take a deep breath. Why don't you maybe pick something, send me a link, and we can talk about it." So I sent her a link to the whole store, and I imagine Christmas should be interesting this year. But I wasn't always this excited to proclaim myself MCC. I wasn't always so proud to be part of a denomination or to share with anyone that I was actually a Christian or, heaven forbid, a church person. A number of years ago, the only relationship that I had with God included shouting God's name when I was involved in the most intimate and spiritual of acts. As far as I was concerned, church happened between my bed sheets. And I was okay with that. What I knew of the Christian church was that what I believed to be the most beautiful thing that I did with my body, they said was the most shameful. What I found most spiritual, they said was most sinful. So why would I want to spend time with these people? At the time, Jillian was doing quite a bit of church shopping. Sometimes she would find a church that she liked and she'd go back a few times before eventually the pastor would say something racist or homophobic or sexist or otherwise offensive. She'd come home and say, "Not my God." I would agree and say, "Not my God, not my people." Further evidence for why I did not need church. At some point, one of Jillian's co-workers invited her to the Metropolitan Community Church of New Haven. Of course, Jillian invited me to go. She said that there were a lot of LGBTQ people there, and the pastor was a lesbian. Intriguing. But no, thanks. I'm not doing that. I declined. I imagined that the only thing worse than a Christian church would be a gay Christian church, because I imagined it would only be full of shame and sadness. But convinced that this church would be a great place, Jillian resorted to bribery. I believe that New Haven's Ashley's famous ice cream was on the table, and the promise that one way or another I would be screaming God's name by the end of the day. So when you put it that way, church sounds lovely. So I went, reluctant and bitter, believing that I was too cool and too evolved to spend time with these people. But as we walked in the door, we were met by hugs from strangers. We found that the couple in the pew in front of us was just as snarky and sarcastic as we were. The pastor's prophetic sermon was unlike anything I had ever heard in church before. The music had me up on my feet, and was I involuntarily clapping? Was I moving my body? What is happening? Is this joy? Is this what they call joy? What is this place, and what sorcery is happening? Is this with all the happiness and the warmth? I'm not so sure. Sometimes when I tell this story, I end here and say, the rest is history. But it's not quite true. It took some time to win me over. It took some time and sporadic attendance in the beginning before we eventually started spending every Sunday with our new church family. Eventually we became members, and then we joined the ministry and motion team and the fundraising committee. I became the worship coordinator. I was the churchiest churchgoer that ever did church. The more we went to MCC New Haven and the more that we learned about the Fellowship of Metropolitan Community Churches, the more I wanted to be part of this denomination and this ministry. Unlike other Christian churches that I had been to, it seemed like MCC was doing one thing right: following the teachings of Jesus and spreading radical love. This inclusive message has grown from MCC's humble beginnings founded at the intersection of sexuality, spirituality, and justice. The first meeting of the Metropolitan Community Church took place in Reverend Elder Troy Perry's living room with 12 people. They gathered to boldly claim that you could be gay and Christian. Soon the message spread that you could love both your lovers and Jesus. And Jesus loved you just the same. Because even deviants are loved by God. Finally, gay, lesbian, bisexual, and soon trans and queer folk had a church home. All those who were told they were sinful, who were ostracized and marginalized, and abused for being the people God's self created them to be, were affirmed in their love and in their identities. They were home. MCC grew in Los Angeles, and it wasn't long before metropolitan community churches were popping up around the country, Boston being one of the first, proclaiming with it Jesus' radical love. In the beginning, we did something that no other Christian church would do, and that was to affirm our sexuality, and not just the same-sex attraction that many felt, but the beauty of sexuality itself as a gift from God. Celebrating our connection with the divine and our connection with others. For God is love, spiritually, emotionally, and yes, bodily. Our desires are God-given and something to be celebrated. In today's reading from the Song of Solomon, or Song of Songs, in bed the lover yearns for hers, hearing him knock on the door and thinking of all the reasons for why it may be impractical for her to answer. But in the end, overcome with desire, she says, "My beloved thrust his hand into the opening, and my inmost being yearned for him. I arose to open to my beloved, and my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh, upon the handles of the bolt." Her lover's not there, but her desire is. As many of us have courageously followed in our own desires, she sets out to look for him. But she says, "Making their rounds in the city, the sentinels found me. They beat me, they wounded me, and they took away my mantle. Those sentinels of the walls, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, tell him this, I am faint with love." How many of us, now held by MCC, have been wounded and beaten by so-called believers in Christ, or by the institution of church, or by our own families? But like our resilient lover, we find the courage to love on. And that courage, oftentimes, has come from the support many of us have received from the Metropolitan Community Church. The place that reminds us that our love and our desires are a gift from God, and not something to be ashamed of. Founded on the message of radical love, MCC was the first Christian church to assert that queer people are also beloved children of God. MCC didn't stop there. The denomination grew and continued to hold those who were ostracized by other denominations, those who most needed to feel God's love. MCC became the only place where those who were HIV positive or living with AIDS could feel the comfort and warmth they most needed. It was during the AIDS crisis that MCC Boston grew in numbers and in faith. This particular congregation and many other MCC churches around the country became home to those who had no other. Holding and caring again for the most marginalized in our society. Suffering also the tragic loss of so many of our gay siblings, and caring for the caretakers left to mourn. MCC has always been ahead of its time when it comes to spiritual activism. MCC Boston in particular, and the denomination as a whole, not only offered refuge, but fought for the rights of those most impacted as well. Putting faith into action is something that MCC has continued to do throughout our 47-year history. Continuing to minister to the marginalized, MCC grew not only in the United States, but around the world. And so that we are now known globally as a human rights church. And that was something that my jaded, too cool for church self could get behind when I first learned about the Metropolitan Community Church. With a history for caring of LGBTQ and other marginalized people, spreading this radical love and fighting for justice at every turn. This is church. This is Christianity, spreading the message that all people are loved equally by God. A message not dreamed up by our founding members, but Jesus' own message, lived into by our beloved community. As followers of Jesus, we are grounded in faith, not law. Not law, both religious and secular, that is too often used to restrict our freest expression of ourselves. Paul's letter to the Galatians reminds us that in Jesus we are delivered from law and thus learn in love. Paul writes, "Now before faith came, we were imprisoned and guarded under the law until faith would be revealed. Therefore the law was our disciplinarian until Christ came, so that we might be justified by faith. But now that faith has come, we are no longer subject to a disciplinarian, for in Christ Jesus you are all children of God through faith." At the cornerstone of MCC is the belief that we are all beloved children of God in Jesus' boundless love. Paul continues that there is no longer Jew or Greek, there is no longer slave or free, there is no longer male and female, for all of you are one in Christ Jesus. The boxes that many like to create and force us into do not exist. They don't exist, for we are all the same in Christ's love. Something that I didn't understand until MCC. For it is MCC that lives this reality into the church and into the world. As we are called to be MCC, we are called to love like Christ. That boundless, radical love that pulled us from the depths and into healing. As we celebrate MCC's birthday, we're reminded of our rich history of helping so many queer people, while also asking, with whom has this message not been shared? As the global human rights church, MCC must continue to spread this radical love and live into our calling of welcoming, affirming, and celebrating the most marginalized among us. It includes welcoming refugees, both spiritual and physical, affirming alternative relationship structures, celebrating those with mental illness, physical illness, and those with disabilities, embracing those who are homeless and unhoused, caring for those who have been harmed physically and emotionally. It means creating a spiritual home for those who have been taught that they are not worthy of God's grace. Creating a safe space for all of those who have been harmed by religious and spiritual law. There must be no end to our welcoming embrace. When MCC first began, many early members thought that MCC would be a temporary denomination. Once the hypocrisy of so many other denominations was exposed, people would be forced to apologize and welcome their queer siblings home. It soon became apparent, however, that MCC was meant for something far greater. While MCC certainly opened the doors for other denominations to begin welcoming queer Christians, there's still much work to be done before all God's children are made to feel fully whole and fully human, both within our church walls and outside. Standing firmly at the intersection of spirituality, sexuality, and justice, MCC is called to celebrate, affirm, and spread love to all God's children. For my freedom is bound with yours. Our equality relies on the understanding that there is not one person, not a single person, who is worth any less than any other. We must fully embody MCC's message both within and outside these church walls so that all persons feel our radical welcome and our radical love. We are called to be love,